Montana, autumn. A storm. Allison Burke froze at the sound, her dog barking. Frantic. Lightning lit two figures in her field. One fell. The other limped forward, holding something. Rifle in hand, she stepped onto the porch. A man collapsed in the mud, soaked and bleeding. In his arms, a baby. "Please," he gasped. "Her mother's gone. We were cast out. Help us." Rain fell harder. The child cried, and Allison stared, heart pounding. Allison Burke had once been the kind of woman who waved to neighbors from her porch and baked 2 pies when one would have done. She sang loud in church, taught reading at the schoolhouse, and danced barefoot with her husband under a sky full of stars. Her laughter had filled the house, and when her little boy giggled, it sounded like the world might never end. But the world did end. 3 years ago, a fire took everything. A lantern in the barn. A scream. Then silence. The barn caught first. Her husband, Jonathan, had gone in to check the stalls. Nathaniel, their son, only 7, had followed him with his wooden toy horse in hand. Allison had been inside preparing supper when the dog barked. By the time she reached the door, flames were climbing into the night. She ran until her lungs gave out. She screamed until her voice tore. She tried the doors, tried the windows. Too late. Neighbors came. Buckets, shovels, ash in the air. But the fire had already done its work. By morning there was only ruin. They buried Jonathan and Nathaniel on the hill beneath the plum tree. Allison carved the names herself into 2 wooden crosses and planted daffodils that never quite took root. The preacher offered to say words. She declined. People came with food, with sorrow, with silence. But grief outlasts kindness. Within weeks, the town moved on. She stayed. She stopped going to church, stopped baking, stopped speaking unless it was to the dog, Rust, who lay beside her bed every night and never left her side. Her hands, once quick and joyful, became hard and slow. The orchard grew wild. She let the roof leak. She let the wind come through the cracks. Allison did not try to live. She tried to endure. She worked the land just enough to survive: corn, beans, chickens, and goats. She patched what needed patching. She stopped setting 2 plates at dinner. Stopped opening her windows in spring. In town, people pitied her, then feared her, then forgot her. Children whispered about the widow on Ash Hill. Some said she talked to ghosts. Others that she kept her boys' shoes by the hearth. Both were true. Time became something else, not a measure of progress, but a weight. Days passed in rhythm. Rise, work, eat, sleep. On Sundays, she sat alone on the porch, her Bible untouched beside her, and listened to the wind blow through the orchard. One winter, the cold came early. Pipes froze. Firewood ran low. Allison spent 3 nights curled on the floor with Rust, wrapped in every blanket she owned. On the 4th morning, she stood by the stove for a long time, a match in one hand, her wedding ring in the other. Then Rust whined, pressed his nose into her ribs, and she lit the fire. That spring, she planted nothing. That summer, she mended the fence only where the goats got out. That fall, she let the daffodils go. And still she stayed. The storm came in October. A black sky, wind that tore branches loose, rain that fell sideways, thunder so loud it shook the windows. She'd just come in from the barn when Rust began to growl. A low, steady sound she hadn't heard in years. Then he barked. Loud, urgent. Allison looked out the window, and lightning split the sky. 2 figures moved through the field. One fell. The other limped forward, clutching something small. Her hands moved before her thoughts did. She took the rifle from beside the door and stepped onto the porch. Rain soaked her skirt in seconds. Mud clung to her boots. The wind pushed against her. Then she saw him, the man, bloodied, barefoot, kneeling in the mud, and in his arms a baby. Please, he gasped. Her mother gone. Cast out, help us. Behind him, the field shuddered in the wind. The baby cried again, shrill, thin, real. Allison did not move. She had spent 3 years closing every door, sealing every crack, learning to live with silence. But that cry, that one sound, splintered something. It wasn't pity she felt, or fear, or memory. It was instinct, sudden and sharp. A man at death's door, a child still breathing. The world she had buried deep within herself stirred. And for the first time in a long time, Allison Burke stepped forward. His name was Jake Aubrey. He said it like a confession, quietly, as if unsure whether it still belonged to him. He sat hunched at Allison's table, rain dripping from his hair, blood darkening his side, a baby swaddled in his arms. Rust lay by the fire, one eye fixed on the stranger, ears twitching. Allison hadn't moved from where she stood, near the stove, rifle still within reach. The storm outside was fading into wind and dripping branches. The heat inside came only from the fire. The man, Jake, was shivering hard now, not from cold alone. From something deeper, exhaustion, pain, fear. Allison saw it all, but her eyes were on the child. The baby's cheeks were flushed from crying, but her breaths came steady. Her hands curled into her blanket, fists the size of bird hearts. One tiny foot had wriggled free, damp and pink from the rain. "She's not sick?" Allison asked finally. Jake shook his head, then winced. "Cold, hungry, but she's strong." He looked down at the child, his expression softening. "She's stronger than me." He touched the side of the blanket, almost afraid to hold her too tightly. "She hasn't had milk since yesterday morning. I gave her the last of the cornbread. Chewed it, made it soft. It wasn't enough." "What's her name?" Jake hesitated. "Nora. I call her that. But it's not official. Not by her people. They wouldn't let me name her." Allison moved slowly to the cupboard. She took down a small tin of goat's milk she'd been saving for a sickly lamb that didn't survive the spring. She poured it into a pan and set it over the fire. "She'll take it," she said, "if you warm it first." Jake's shoulders sagged. He nodded once, barely. "Thank you." Silence returned. Not the heavy silence that lives between enemies, but the kind between two people unsure how to speak without breaking something delicate. Allison watched him while the milk heated. His hair was long, matted from rain. His skin was darker than hers, copper-toned and streaked with grime. Blood stained the back of his shirt. Not soaked, but enough to worry her. He kept shifting in his seat like he couldn't find a position that didn't hurt. His eyes flicked now and then to the window, listening, expecting. Finally, he said, "You should know why we're here." Allison didn't speak, but she nodded. A single nod that said, "Go on." "My wife was Crow, from the Northern Territories. I met her 5 years ago. I was hunting alone, got pinned in a rockslide, broke 2 ribs. She found me, nursed me back." He looked down at the floor. "They said she was a dreamer, saw visions, followed birds. She believed the world could change if people stopped being afraid of one another. We lived together in her camp, far from settlements. It wasn't always easy. Her people tolerated me. But after Nora, after the birth," he trailed off. "What happened?" "She died," he whispered. "In childbirth. There was blood. Too much. No midwife. No help." He pressed a hand to his face, as if the memory was fresh and cutting. "They said it was my fault, that she died because she married outside her blood. They said the baby was cursed, a bad omen. They tried to take her, to send her away or worse." He paused, his voice breaking. "So I ran, took her and ran." He reached into his shirt and pulled out a tiny carved token, a feather etched from bone. "My wife gave me this before she went into labor, said to keep it close, that it would remind Nora who she came from." He set it on the table. "It's all I have left of her." Allison stepped closer and reached for the milk. She tested it with her wrist, then took a clean cloth and dipped one corner into the warm liquid. She carried it over and knelt by the baby's basket. "Let's try," she said. Jake shifted to let her in. Allison offered the milk-soaked cloth to the child's lips. Nora turned, whimpered, then began to suckle. Slowly, weakly, but it was something. Jake watched in silence. "She's hungry," Allison murmured, "but she'll take it." His head dropped. and his shoulders shook once. Not from cold, but from some fragile relief that made his whole body still. They didn't speak again until the baby slept. By then, Jake had slipped into a doze himself, head resting against the table's edge, his fingers still curled protectively near the basket. Allison sat in the rocker, the rifle still close, but her hands now folded in her lap. It had been years since anyone had sat at that table. Years since a child had cried within these walls. Years since someone had needed her for more than a pound of flour or a fence repair. And yet, tonight, the house didn't feel full of ghosts. It felt like a place someone could live again. In the morning, the sun broke through thin clouds. Allison made eggs and boiled more oats. Jake woke slowly, still stiff, his side bleeding again. "You've got fever coming," she said. "That wound's turning. You need proper cleaning, salve, stitches." "I'll manage," he replied. But he couldn't sit up without grimacing. "Not if you plan to keep walking." Jake looked at her, something wary in his gaze. "I never said I was staying." "You didn't have to," she answered. She helped him to the chair and unwrapped the bandages. The wound was bad, a clean cut but infected at the edges, probably from a blade or sharp rock. She cleaned it again, applied her strongest salve, and began stitching. Jake clenched his teeth, said nothing. Rust sat beside him, watching. When it was done, Allison handed him a cup of broth. "You'll stay," she said, "until you can walk without bleeding." Jake stared into the cup. "Every day I stay puts you at risk. Every day you walk with a fever puts her at risk," Allison said, nodding toward the baby. Jake looked over, and whatever protest he had dissolved. He drank the broth. By the third day, he could stand on his own. By the fourth, he'd begun stacking the woodpile without being asked. On the fifth, Allison found him at the east fence, hammering a loose post back into place. "You planning to fix the whole property?" she asked. He looked up and offered a small smile. "Seems only fair. You saved our lives." Allison crossed her arms. "A roof and some milk. That's not a life." Jake shrugged. "It's more than anyone else offered." Later that day, she found a set of woven straps drying on the porch rail. "What's this?" she asked. Jake touched them carefully. "I used to make these, for carrying supplies, or babies. Thought it might help you when you hold her." "I'm not holding her." "You will." The days stretched, short and cool, with the scent of autumn rising from the trees. The orchard behind the house dropped fruit like gold. Nora began to laugh, a real laugh, when Jake tossed her gently in the air. She kicked her feet when Rust sniffed her toes. She slept deeper, cried less. One morning, Allison caught herself humming an old tune her husband used to play on the fiddle. She stopped mid-note, but Jake heard. "You sing," he said, surprised. "I used to." "You should again." Allison didn't answer, but that night when she rocked Nora to sleep, she sang. Soft, barely above a whisper. Jake listened from the porch. He didn't speak. He just closed his eyes and let it carry across the dark. Allison didn't mean to let them stay longer than a night. But when morning came and Jake tried to stand, his knees buckled. So she made tea, lit the stove, fed the baby. When afternoon came, he asked to help with the barn roof. The storm had torn it in 2 places. "You're wounded," she said. "I've worked through worse," he replied. By dusk, the roof was patched. The next day, he gathered apples from the orchard. The day after that, he repaired the west fence. And so it went. No words passed between them about staying. No decisions were made. But every task Jake finished, every moment he spent rocking the baby, every log he stacked or nail he set, it became harder for Allison to pretend he didn't belong there, and harder to pretend she didn't want him to. Jake spoke little, but when he did, it was with care. He told stories of the plains, of buffalo hunts and winter trails. Stories his mother told him in Lakota, and his father repeated in English. Sometimes, while Nora dozed in her basket, he would sing low and rhythmic melodies that sounded older than language. Allison listened from the porch. Once, she asked, "Don't you miss your people?" Jake paused before answering. They weren't mine. Not all the way. And after Mira died, there was no one left who would take Nora. Or me. What will you do when you heal? Jake looked down at his hands. I thought I'd run. Farther west. Maybe north. Keep ahead of them. Allison didn't ask who them was. He had already told her about the searchers. Men from the tribe, maybe others who wanted Nora taken back or silenced. Maybe they feared a curse. Maybe they feared truth. Maybe they just didn't want a child with two bloodlines to live and remember. She had known men like that, who feared what they could not control. You can't run forever, she said. Jake gave a faint smile. No, but I can run long enough to give her a start. Nora cooed then, reaching toward the spoon Jake held. He let her grab it, grinning when she tried to chew the handle. Allison turned back to the hearth. You don't have to run today. Jake's answer came like a breath. No, not today. By the second week, they had a routine. Allison rose early, gathered eggs. Jake split firewood. Nora sat wrapped in shawls, watching the world. Rust became her guardian. He never strayed far. Jake cleared the stable loft, made it livable. Not perfect, but dry, warm. A bed of straw and two thick blankets. He moved there quietly without being told. Each evening they shared supper. Allison by the stove, Jake nearby, Nora between them. Sometimes Allison spoke of her son. Slowly, haltingly. First just his name. Then his laugh. Then the way he once tried to ride a pig in the orchard. Jake listened without pity. Without interruption. I thought grief would kill me, she said one night. But it didn't. It just left me here. Empty. Jake didn't speak. But when Nora stirred, he lifted her gently into his arms and said, Then maybe you're ready to be full again. On the 15th day, someone knocked. Not the frantic thump of Jake's arrival. A slow, deliberate knock. Allison opened the door, rifle in hand. Judge Carl Finch stood on her porch. Behind him, two men with long coats. Hired guns. Finch removed his hat. Afternoon, Miss Burke. Judge. He glanced past her. We've had reports. A man seen near your land. Possibly an Indian. Possibly dangerous. I've seen no danger, Allison said. Finch's smile was thin. You wouldn't be hiding anyone, would you? I live alone. Behind her, Nora cried. The judge's eyes flicked toward the sound. You've taken in a child? Allison's voice was flat. That's none of your concern. One of the men stepped forward. There's a bounty on a half-breed fugitive, said to be traveling with a stolen child. Jake appeared then, behind Allison. Not armed, just standing. His voice was calm. She's my daughter. Finch stared at him. Your kind causes trouble. Allison raised her rifle slightly. She's not trouble. And neither is he. The men stiffened. You're harboring him, Finch said. You'll answer for that. Then another voice spoke. We'll stand with her. From the trees emerged Old Man Grayson, her nearest neighbor, rifle in hand. Beside him, Miss Lu Chun, the teacher from town. Then came the Carsons, a young couple from the edge of the valley, hands clasped, determination in their eyes. One by one they stepped forward. Not many, but enough. Finch looked from face to face, his confidence faltering. You'll regret this, he said. No, Allison replied. We won't. The judge and his men turned. They didn't look back. That night, Jake sat by the fire, Nora on his lap. You didn't have to do that, he said. I did, Allison replied. Why? She looked at the child, then at him. Because you stopped running. Rumors moved faster than wagons on dry ground. By the third day after Judge Finch left her porch, Allison Burke's name was in every mouth from Travers Creek to Mill Hollow. You hear she's keeping an Indian in her barn? I heard she's got a baby that ain't hers. They say the judge went out there with 2 hired men and came back red-faced. Some said she'd lost her mind. Others said she'd finally found something to live for, and that scared people more. By the end of the week, Allison saw it in their faces. In the store, at the feed mill, the way conversations stopped when she walked in. The way men stood just a little too straight, a little too still. But the real danger came in boots and horses. 3 men arrived the following Sunday. They didn't come by wagon. They didn't knock. They rode right up to the edge of the orchard, dust trailing behind them like smoke. Jake spotted them first. He was feeding the chickens when he heard the crows scatter and rust bark from the back steps. He stepped out, saw the horses, and went still. The leader of the 3, a man in a flat-brimmed hat and a coat too clean for local work, didn't wait for greetings. "You Jake Aubrey?" Jake said nothing. The man smiled like a wolf. "There's a bounty on your head, son. Not for money, for peace of mind. Some folks want to sleep knowing you're dead." Jake glanced back toward the house. Nora was napping inside. Allison was splitting kindling. The second man drew his revolver. Slowly, deliberately, Jake lifted his hands. "I've got no quarrel with you." The third man spit into the dirt. "Doesn't matter. You're a mark." Then Allison stepped out with her rifle aimed. "This is private land." The man in the flat-brim hat turned. "Miss Burke, I presume. We're not here for you. You draw your guns on my land. That makes you here for me." He raised an eyebrow. "You aiming to protect this fugitive?" "I'm aiming to stop men from murdering a father." The men exchanged looks. "You planning to shoot us all, Miss Burke?" "Only the first one who reaches for the baby." Something shifted in Jake's stance. Something that had been tight and coiled began to breathe again. The men didn't leave right away, but they left. And that, Allison knew, was worse. Because men like that don't ride away empty-handed. They come back with fire. By midweek, strange faces appeared in town. Not settlers. Not drifters. Hired guns. They drank quietly, watched closely, wrote no names. Allison stayed out of town after that. Jake doubled the firewood by the door, fixed the cellar hatch, slept closer to the main house. They didn't speak of what might come, but it hung in the air like smoke. Then, one morning, a stone crashed through her window, wrapped in paper. She unrolled it with shaking hands. 5 words: "Send him out. Or burn." No signature, just threat. Allison didn't show it to Jake until nightfall. He read it once, folded it, put it in his pocket, and said nothing. The next day, the orchard caught fire. Someone had lit a rag in a bottle, hurled it past the east fence. It shattered near the old well, catching dry brush. Jake ran with a pail, Allison with another. It didn't spread far, but the message was clear. This wasn't fear anymore. This was a warning shot, and it would not be the last. That evening, they sat by the fire, neither speaking. Nora slept between them in a cradle Jake had carved from a half-barrel and linen scraps. Allison stared at the flames. Her voice came slowly. "They mean to kill you." Jake didn't look up. "I know. They think I'm protecting you out of pity. Or foolishness." "Are you?" She turned to him. "No." The silence stretched. Jake said, "I can leave. Tonight. Take her. Cross the ridge. They'll follow, but maybe—" "No. You said yourself." "I said no." Her voice was firm, final. "You're not going to die alone in the hills so they can sleep easy." Jake looked down at Nora. She shouldn't have to grow up like this, with men aiming guns at her father. She'll grow up with people who fought for her. He closed his eyes, weariness etched deep. "Then we need help." She rode into town the next morning. People turned when she walked into the feed store, some with scorn, others with curiosity. She went straight to the back, where old man Grayson sat whittling. "I need to speak." He looked up. "About the bounty?" "About the truth." Within an hour, they'd gathered a half-dozen. Folks who still remembered Allison before the fire, who remembered her singing in church, giving quilts in winter, bringing meals when sickness struck. Lu Chin came. So did the Carsons. She told them everything. About Jake, Nora, the threats, and she ended with one sentence. "They will kill him, and I will not stand aside." Grayson nodded. "What do you want from us?" "I need people to stand visible. I need them to see we're not alone." They came at dusk. 6 horses, 2 wagons, more men than before. The man in the flat-brim hat returned, this time with a grin like hunger. He dismounted in the yard. You had your warning. Allison stood on the porch, rifle in hand. Jake beside her. Behind them a lantern flickered. Nora slept inside. The hired guns fanned out. Then something shifted. Old Man Grayson stepped from the trees. Then Lu Chun holding a lantern high. Then the Carsons. 2 more behind them. 7 in all. Not an army, but enough. The lead gunman paused. We don't want a shootout. Then ride on, Grayson said. This man's got blood on his hands. You've got lies in your mouth, Lu said. The wind blew. No one moved. Then Jake stepped forward. If you've come for me, then take me. But leave her. Leave this place. Allison whispered. Don't. I won't have them burn your life down. You are part of this life. The wind moaned through the trees. The man in the hat stared. Weighed his odds. He had numbers. But he didn't have certainty. And men don't die well without certainty. He spat in the dirt. Let's go. One by one they turned their horses. Rode off into the dusk. Not fast. But not slow either. Allison didn't lower the rifle until the last one vanished past the ridge. Then she looked at Jake. He looked at her. And neither spoke. Because everything had changed. It began at sunrise. They returned not with shouts, but silence. 6 riders. No judge. No warning. Just the rhythm of hooves over frost-crusted grass. Allison saw them from the kitchen window. Jake was already reaching for the rifle he'd hidden under the floorboards. Rust growled low, pacing near the door. Allison didn't speak. She strapped Nora to her chest. Jake stepped onto the porch, rifle slung across his shoulder. I'll go alone, he said. No, Allison said. Not again. The riders halted at the edge of the orchard. Their leader dismounted, not the same man as before. Younger, sharper. He walked slowly toward the porch, hand resting on the butt of his pistol. You're protecting a murderer, he called. Allison stepped forward. I'm protecting a father. He stole from his wife's tribe, ran with their dead child. The child isn't dead, she said. She's alive, and loved. The man's eyes flicked to the bundle strapped against her. You'll die for them? No, she said. I'll live for them. Behind her, movement, the sound of boots. Grayson appeared first, then Lu Chun, then the Carsons, 2 more townsfolk, and Miss Haley from the schoolhouse. 9 in total, standing across the yard, rifles ready. The rider's face changed. What is this? This, Grayson said, raising his rifle, is home, and these people are ours. The standoff lasted seconds. The rider twitched, but Grayson was faster. His Winchester cocked. The sound cracked like thunder. The rider froze. Nobody fired. Not yet. Then one of the horses bucked. A gunman flinched. A shot rang out into the dirt. Still, no one fired back. Jake didn't raise his rifle. Allison didn't blink. The rider looked around. Saw his men shift. Saw the quiet resolve in every face across from him. He wasn't facing warriors. He was facing a town that had chosen to stand. He turned, mounted his horse, said nothing, and they rode away, all of them, slow. Not defeated, but turned back by something stronger than steel. Community. That night the house was quiet. Nora slept in her cradle. Jake sat at the hearth, staring into the flames. Allison brought 2 mugs of tea, set one beside him. He didn't speak at first. Then, quietly, I didn't think I'd see a day like this. She sat. Neither did I. He looked at her. You could have turned me out. I almost did. And now, Allison looked toward the window. Outside, frost shimmered on the grass. Inside, warmth. Now, she said, we build. 5 years passed. The land changed first. The broken fence was long rebuilt. The orchard bore fruit again, heavy and sweet. New saplings had been planted in straight rows, each one with a name carved into its stake. Nathaniel, Mira, others too, those lost but remembered. A second house stood near the first. Smaller, rounder, with a smoke hole and a woven roof. Jake's design, built by many hands. Then came a third, and a fourth. It was no longer just a farm. It was becoming a village. Children ran where weeds once grew. Their voices rang across the grass like birds at dawn. Some were pale-skinned, some dark, some both. They spoke two languages. They shared two heritages. Nora was the first to speak them fluently. By 5, she could switch between Lakota and English like breath and heartbeat. She ran wild through the orchard, her braids snapping in the wind, Rust's sun chasing her like a shadow. Jake spent mornings by the stream, weaving baskets. His hands moved slow, sure, teaching others as he worked. He sang sometimes, songs from his mother's tongue, stories braided into melody. Allison taught reading in the long room of the house. Her voice, once quieted by grief, had become something steady and bright. She had 12 students now, children from the valley and beyond, some orphaned, some cast out, all welcome. They learned to read, to listen, to speak with kindness. At noon, they ate together bread, beans, apples when in season. In the evenings, they sang. More came. A widower with a boy too quiet to speak. A woman with a limp and sharp eyes, carrying a fiddle she hadn't played in years. A Crow grandmother and her grandsons, fleeing a border camp. Each one found space. They built more shelters, cleared new fields, dug a second well. It wasn't peace always. Arguments rose, cultures clashed, old wounds reopened. But they listened and kept building, not with fear, with choice. One autumn evening, Allison sat on the porch as dusk settled soft across the trees. The air smelled of ash and ripe fruit. Nora lay curled near her feet, asleep under a wool blanket. Jake sat nearby, carving. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, not looking up. "Which part?" Opening the door, Allison looked down at the girl, at the shawl wrapped around her shoulders, at the orchard, glowing gold in the last light. "No," she said. Jake nodded. "Me neither." Silence wrapped them then, not hollow like before, full of laughter in the distance, of wind moving through apple leaves, of children learning both sides of a story. A cry rose somewhere, then quieted. A dog barked. Someone sang. And the world turned quietly, without fear.